Nazi Germany designed some of the most fearsome and sophisticated combat vehicles of the conflict. The Jagdpanther, a tank destroyer with the power of a Tiger II and the mobility of a Panther, was feared for its accuracy and armor. Stug III, although initially conceived as an assault gun, became one of the most produced and effective armored vehicles of the entire war. And the Hunting Tiger, the heaviest tank destroyer ever deployed, it could destroy any enemy from miles away, although its size made it difficult to maneuver. In addition, there were other equally impressive vehicles. The blinded armored train, it was equipped with heavy artillery and anti-aircraft guns, being a steel monster on rails, Sd.Kfz. 234 Puma, agile and fast, was ideal for in-depth reconnaissance, and the Horton-Ho 229, a jet-powered flying wing, anticipated stealth technologies decades earlier. These devices show the extent of German engineering when directed toward the service of total warfare. Sd.Kfz 251, the armored virtuoso that gave the Wehrmacht a strategic advantage. In the Nazi vision of the perfect war, mobility was key. Blitzkrieg, the lightning war, was not just a tactical concept. It was a mechanical symphony in which armored vehicles, infantry and aircraft moved as a single unit, sweeping away everything in their path. But that harmony required an instrument to transport soldiers with the same speed as tanks, with protection from enemy fire and the ability to advance where conventional vehicles failed. Thus, the Sd.Kfz 251, formerly called the Sonderkraftfahrzeug 251, was the Wehrmacht's most iconic half-track vehicle. A hybrid creature half-truck, half-tank designed to deliver troops to the front line quickly and safely. It was not a lethal weapon in and of itself, but its role as support was essential. Wherever a 251 appeared, the German motorized infantry was nearby, and with it the heart of the lightning advance. Designed by the Hanomag Company and put into production in 1939, the Sd.Kfz 251 combined two key technologies: front wheels for steering and rear tracks for traction. This configuration gave it extraordinary maneuverability on rough terrain without sacrificing speed or payload capacity. Its low, angular chassis, covered with armored steel plates, could withstand shrapnel impacts and light fire. It was not invulnerable, but it was robust enough to survive the chaos of the front lines. The vehicle could carry 10 troops plus the driver and co-pilot, and could be fitted with a front-mounted MG-34 or MG-42 machine gun. Some versions added another one at the rear, or replaced these with armament, specialized. Because the 251 wasn't a single vehicle, but a modular platform that could be adapted to dozens of roles: troop transport, command vehicle, flamethrower, mortar carrier, anti-aircraft gun, armored ambulance, even rocket launcher. There were more than 20 official variants and hundreds of field adaptations. During the invasion of Poland and France, the Sd.Kfz 251 became the symbol of the coordinated advance. Panzer divisions reinforced with these vehicles broke through enemy lines at breakneck speed, followed by infantry that did not need to march on foot or be exposed. The 251st allowed soldiers to fight from the safety of their interior or disembark directly under fire without being annihilated. On the Eastern Front, this vehicle proved its worth in extreme conditions. Mud, snow, trackless terrain. Nothing stopped the 251st. Its crawler tracks gave it traction where trucks could get stuck, and its low profile prevented it from being easily detected or destroyed. It was, in some ways, a humble vehicle, but lethally efficient. However, its efficiency came at a price. Each unit required time, steel, fuel, and skilled labor. As the war dragged on and the German economy collapsed, its production could not meet the demands of the front. Many soldiers were still transported in open trucks or even on foot, lacking the protection and versatility of the 251. It is estimated that more than 15,000 units were built, but never enough to equip all Panzergrenadier divisions as planned. Another weakness was its limited armor, just 14.5 millimeters in its frontal version. This made it vulnerable to anti-tank weapons, artillery, and air attacks. As the Allies gained air superiority, the 251s went from being mobile assets to potential targets. Furthermore, their mechanical complexity required constant maintenance, something difficult in the harsh conditions of the Eastern Front or the disorderly retreat. Even so, the Sd.Kfz 251 left a profound mark. It was the forerunner of the modern armored personnel carrier, the first true combination of mobility, protection, and light offensive capability. Its design directly inspired later vehicles like the American M3 half-track and laid the foundations for post-war mechanized doctrine. But its image was inevitably linked to the face of Nazi blitzkrieg. When the 251sts appeared, it signaled that the German advance was underway. Entire columns of these vehicles, crisscrossing villages, fields, and ruins, became a familiar sight across the devastated continent. This was modern warfare on wheels, made of steel and speed. It wasn't a titan like the Tiger. It didn't fly like the Me 262. It didn't unleash the apocalypse from the sky like the V2, but the Sd.Kfz. 251 was, without a doubt, the logistical heart of German mobile warfare. And as such, it was everywhere, with every invasion, every retreat, every desperate attempt to hold the front, until the wheels stopped and the Reich lay in ruins. Tank hunter Jagdtiger, the steel colossus that didn't arrive in time to save the Führer in the twilight of the Third Reich, when defeat was inevitable but megalomania knew no bounds, Germany conceived a weapon so massive it seemed like something out of an armored nightmare. A steel behemoth designed not to run but to crush. A beast that neither fled nor retreated but waited silently and destroyed with a single shot. It was the Jagdtiger, the heaviest tank hunter ever deployed in combat. Its full name was Panzerkampfwagen VI B, but it was better known as Jagdtiger, the hunting tiger. And that was no exaggeration. This armored colossus, based on the Tiger II chassis, weighed more than 75 tons and mounted a cannon that resembled a siege artillery piece. The 128mm Pak 44, derived from an anti-aircraft gun but adapted to hunt tanks from miles away. Its mere presence on the battlefield was enough to inspire terror. The Jagdtiger could destroy any Allied vehicle before it had a chance to respond. Its cannon could penetrate up to 250mm of armor. 2,000 meters. Not even the lumbering Churchill's IS-2s or the dreaded Sherman Firefly were a match. The Jagdtiger was, in theory, the apex predator of the battlefield. But this creature came at a price. Its weight made it slow, clumsy, and prone to mechanical failure. Its Maybach engine, designed for lighter tanks, simply couldn't handle such mass. Its top speed barely exceeded 34 kilometers per hour in ideal conditions, but it rarely reached even that. On rough terrain or in winter, many broke down or became stuck before seeing combat. The overloaded internal mechanics suffered constantly. The transmission broke easily, the suspension system struggled to support the weight, and fuel consumption was so high that the vehicle was literally unsustainable for the German war economy of 1945. Only around 70 units were produced, many of which never saw actual combat. On a technical level, the Jagdtiger was a daring feat of engineering. Its frontal armor reached 250mm thick, making it virtually impenetrable by standard enemy armament. Even 76mm guns or heat shells had trouble damaging it frontally. In static defense or ambush, it was invincible. But outside of that ideal situation, it became its own enemy. The design did not include a turret. The gun was mounted in a fixed casemate, which meant the vehicle had to rotate the entire chassis to aim laterally. This design simplified manufacturing and offered internal space, but compromised its ability to react in close combat. In the final months of the war, units such as the Schwere Panzerjägerabteilung 512 operated Jagdtigers on the Western Front, particularly during the defense of the Rhine and the Battle of Remagen. In some isolated engagements, a single Jagdtiger destroyed entire columns of Allied armor. But these beastly tanks also quickly ran out of fuel, were disabled or destroyed by airstrikes. Their impact was more psychological and propaganda than real. Nevertheless, the Allies were impressed. Never before had an armored force faced such a massive weapon. Even Soviet commanders, accustomed to facing the Tiger and Panther, recognized that the Jagdtiger was a symbol of German industrial power and also of its arrogance. Because at its core, the Jagdtiger represented everything that was wrong with the Nazi war machine in 1945. Too expensive, too complex, too late. A gigantic beast at a time when war was no longer won with monsters but with numbers, logistics, and air. But no one who saw it up close forgot it. Its imposing silhouette, its enormous cannon, the earth-shaking thunder of its shot left an indelible mark. It was a masterpiece doomed from the start, a mechanical dinosaur born in the age of missiles and rationed fuel. After the German surrender, several Jagdtigers were captured by the Allies. Some were sent for ballistic testing, others ended up in museums. None fought again, and so ended its brief reign, the most lethal hunter who almost never hunted. The Jagdtiger was the last roar of Hitler's armored empire, a machine that in another context might have turned battles, but in the real world it was only the reflection of a dying Reich, still dreaming of impossible colossi. Panzer IV, the legendary Nazi tank that became synonymous with German armored power. Not all war vehicles are made to shine. Some fail to impress with their size or firepower. They don't hold armor records or feature in epic legends. And yet they are essential. They are the ones that fight every day, on every front, without respite. Such was the Panzerkampfwagen VI, the Panzer IV. It wasn't the largest or the most feared, but it proved to be the most reliable, versatile and durable tank of the Third Reich, becoming synonymous with Hitler's armored might. Conceived in the mid-1930s by designer Heinz Guderian, the Panzer IV was initially intended as an infantry support vehicle. It was envisioned that the Panzer III would take on combat against other tanks, while the heavier Panzer IV, with a short-range gun, would be dedicated to destroying enemy fortifications and positions. But the war had other plans. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, the Panzer IV was already in service. Its first versions, with a short 75mm KWK 37L/24 cannon, they were useful against bunkers and entrenched soldiers, but as the Wehrmacht faced more powerful tanks, such as the Soviet T-34, the Panzer IV was modified, reinforced, and sent back into battle again and again. What began as a second-line vehicle ended up being the backbone of the Panzer divisions. Throughout the war, the Panzer IV underwent numerous upgrades. Its armor increased from 30 to 80 millimeters at the front. Its gun was replaced by the KWK 40L43 and later the L48, capable of penetrating most enemy armor at medium ranges. The tracks were enlarged, side skirts were added, new sights, improved transmission, and additional armor against explosives and armor-piercing shells. These modifications extended its service life and kept it competitive even in 1944, when it was already facing the powerful Sherman T-34/85 and Churchill. Unlike the Panther or the Tiger, the Panzer IV was easier to manufacture, repair, and operate. It wasn't perfect, but it was available. And in modern warfare, availability is power. More than 8,500 units were built throughout the conflict, more than any other German tank model. It was present on every front, from the Russian steppes to the sands of North Africa, from Normandy to the Balkans. Wherever there was a German offensive, the Panzer IV was at the forefront. Its versatility also made it the basis for other lethal machines. Its chassis produced the Stug IV, the Jagdpanzer IV, the Brummbär, and even armored personnel carriers and recovery vehicles. It was, in essence, the workhorse of the German army. But that usefulness had its limits. Beginning in 1943, the Panzer IV began to show its weaknesses. Its tall silhouette made it an easy target. Its 300-horsepower engine couldn't compete with more modern models. Its side armor remained vulnerable to flank fire and portable anti-tank charges, and while its gun was respectable, it couldn't match the firepower of the Panther or the Soviet IS-2. Furthermore, mass production required resources that Germany no longer had. Allied bombing, raw material shortages, and the loss of key factories made it difficult to maintain a steady flow of vehicles. Even so, Panzer IVs continued to be produced until April 1945. They were literally the last tanks to fight for the Reich. After the war, some captured Panzer IVs were used by nations such as Syria, Turkey, and Spain, continuing their legacy in subsequent conflicts. It was such a solid design that, despite its age, it could still meet modern challenges with minor modifications. The Panzer IV didn't inspire admiration like the Tiger. It wasn't feared like the Jagdpanther. It didn't fly or fire rockets. But no other German vehicle fought so hard so far for so long. It was the common soldier's tank, the armored vehicle that didn't promise glory but offered battle, the one that it was there when the others broke down, sank, or never arrived. In the ruins of Berlin, amid the rubble and fire, there were still Panzer IVs resisting to the bitter end. Not as symbols of power, but as witnesses to a war machine that until its last breath tried to keep up the fight. The scourge of the Soviet T-34, the Tiger I, the elite of the Panzerwaffe. On the battlefields of Europe, where the roar of artillery fused with the wailing of soldiers, a silhouette emerged feared by all who dared to confront the Third Reich. It was imposing, lethal, almost invincible, its name simple but powerful, Tiger, the Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger Ausf. E, better known as Tiger I Son, was a work of engineering that embodied Nazi military philosophy, technological superiority, destructive power, and psychological terror. Developed by Henschel, the Tiger I first entered combat in September 1942 on the Eastern Front near Leningrad, with the aim of destroying the Soviet T-34s. Its mere appearance changed the paradigm of armored warfare. The Tiger. I was not a simple tank. It was a rolling fortress. From a technical standpoint, the Tiger I was a marvel for its time. It weighed nearly 57 tons, measured 8.45 meters long, and was powered by a 700-horsepower Maybach HL 230P45 engine, allowing it to reach a top speed of 38 kilometers per hour, 24 miles per hour on the road. Its frontal armor reached 100 millimeters, while its main gun, the famous 8.8 centimeter KWK-36L/56, was capable of destroying any Allied armored vehicle at over 2,000 meters, 6,000 feet. In terms of firepower and protection, no Allied tank could compare. The impact of the Tiger I was immediate. On the Eastern Front, the once dominant Soviet T-34s were rendered obsolete. In Africa, during the Tunisian campaign, the Tiger I sowed panic among the British. And in Normandy, its mere mention was enough to disrupt Allied advance plans. So iconic was its image that Allied reports often exaggerated its presence, giving rise to the so-called Tiger syndrome. But its perfection came at a price. The Tiger I was expensive and complex. Each unit required a colossal investment of resources and time. While Germany built a single Tiger, the Soviets produced several T-34s. Its transmission was fragile, its engine prone to overheating, and its maintenance on the battlefield proved a logistical nightmare. It consumed enormous amounts of fuel, which was a critical problem in a Reich already weakened by strategic bombing and resource shortages. Furthermore, its extreme weight severely limited its mobility. Many bridges could not support its mass, and mud or snow could leave it trapped for hours. While it was nearly impenetrable from the front, its sides and rear were more vulnerable, and the Allies quickly learned to outflank it. Despite everything, the Tiger I became a symbol of power and terror. The crews that operated it were considered elite among the Panzerwaffe. Allied commanders, who saw their units swept from the field, at one point destroying more than 130 tanks, elevated the Tiger's myth to legendary proportions. At Villers-Bocage, a single Tiger unit ambushed a British column and annihilated it in minutes. Such feats cemented its fame. But like any mythological creature, the Tiger also had its Achilles heel, time. As the war progressed, technical superiority was no longer enough. Numbers, logistics, and mass production had to improve as they were the key to victory. The Allies, learning from their mistakes, developed new tactics, more effective anti-tank weapons, and relentlessly bombed the Henschel factories. The Tiger I ceased production in August 1944, with just 1,347 units built. It was replaced by its older brother, the even more fearsome Tiger II, also known as the Königstiger, the Tiger King. Today, few Tiger I units survive. One of the most famous can be found in the Bovington Museum in the United Kingdom, restored and still operational. Its mere presence, even in peacetime, still sends a shiver down the spine. Because the Tiger I was not just a tank, it was a statement of intent. Germany would fight to the bitter end with steel, fire, and deadly precision. The evolution of the beast, Tiger II, the Tiger King, who instilled fear in the Allied armored units, however, the Tiger I would find a more than worthy successor. When the Allied advance became unstoppable and the Red Army broke through the eastern defenses like a torrent of steel, the Third Reich responded with a machine even more colossal, more feared, and more destructive than its predecessor. Its name was Tiger II, although the world would later know it as the Königstiger, the Tiger King, or Royal Tiger to the British. Conceived as the culmination of the Wehrmacht's doctrine of technological superiority, the Tiger II was the heaviest tank operationally deployed by Germany during World War II. It represented the pinnacle of German armored design, a beast that combined the devastating gunpowder of the Tiger I with more sloped and robust armor, inspired by the Soviet T-34. It was in every sense the monarch of the battlefield. From a technical standpoint, the Tiger II was a feat. It weighed 69.8 tons, measured almost 11 meters with its barrel extended, and carried a fearsome 88mm KWK 43L/71 cannon, a longer and more powerful version of the Tiger I's. This cannon could pierce the frontal armor of any Allied tank at over 3,000 meters away. Its frontal armor reached 150 millimeters, sloped at 50 degrees, making it virtually impenetrable in direct engagements. However, this magnificence came at a high cost. Its engine, the 700-horsepower Maybach HL230P 30 horsepower, was the same as that which powered the Tiger I, which was insufficient for a heavier machine. The Tiger II barely reached 35 kilometers per hour on the road, let alone on rough terrain. Its fuel consumption was enormous and its mechanical reliability questionable. The gearbox failed, the tracks broke, and many units were abandoned not because of enemy fire but because of technical breakdowns. The Tiger II first saw combat in July 1944 on the Eastern Front. Later it would fight ferociously in Normandy, the Ardennes, and in the defense of Germany. Its mere presence was enough to halt the enemy advance. Multiple Sherman tanks, tank destroyers, or aerial bombardments were needed to neutralize a single Königstiger. In direct duels, it was almost invulnerable, provided it had an experienced crew and advantageous positions. One of its most iconic performances occurred during Operation Wacht am Rhein, also known as the Battle of the Bulge. On the narrow roads of the Belgian forests, Tiger II columns advanced slowly but with apocalyptic determination. Their armor deflected projectiles like raindrops, but the terrain, bad weather, and enemy logistics soon turned their deployment into an agonizing march. Many were destroyed from the air or abandoned due to lack of fuel. The Tiger II wasn't a tank for a war of attrition. It was a masterpiece for a blitzkrieg that no longer existed. Germany had neither the resources nor the infrastructure to maintain such a sophisticated weapon in large numbers. Only 492 were produced. Meanwhile, the Allies manufactured thousands of lighter, more adaptable tanks, such as the T-34, the Sherman, or the Churchill, which could be replaced quickly and efficiently. Still, every encounter with a Tiger II left an indelible impression. The Tiger II outclassed all of these tanks, and the question was whether the Allies could produce their tanks faster than the Tiger Kings destroyed them. In many cases, its mere appearance caused the withdrawal or redeployment of entire forces. Even at the end of the war, in the ruins of the Reich, it remained a mortal threat. It was the symbol of a regime willing to resist to the last bullet, with cutting-edge technology and a blind faith in impossible victory. The Königstiger wasn't just a tank. It was a desperate declaration of absolute power. It represented Germany's final attempt to assert its supremacy in a war that was already lost. It was the last card of a nation that, facing the abyss, gambled everything on technology and lost. Today, some units are preserved in museums such as Saumur in France and Bovington in England. Even motionless, they command respect. They still make one stop and contemplate what humanity can achieve when it blends genius with arrogance. Panther, the agile tank Hitler used to hunt Stalin's T-34's Kursk, July 1943. On the vast Russian steppe during the most colossal battle humanity had yet witnessed, a new armored predator appeared. Faster than the Tiger, better armed than the Panzer IV, and designed to survive the hell of the Eastern Front. Its name was Panther. Its purpose was devastating. It was to regain the initiative lost to the Soviet T-34 and set a new standard for armored warfare in the Third Reich. The Panzerkampfwagen V Panther, known simply as the Panther, was a direct response to German amazement at the T-34. Surprised by its modern design, sloped armor, and superior mobility, German engineers sought to create a machine that would bring together the best of the armored world: firepower, speed, protection, and reliability. The result was a tank that, many experts consider, was the best German design of the entire war. Technically, the Panther was an agile colossus. It weighed 45 tons, measured almost 9 meters long with its barrel extended, and was powered by a 700-horsepower Maybach HL230P 30 engine. This gave it a top speed of 46 kilometers per hour, remarkable for its size. Its frontal armor, sloped at 55 degrees and up to 80 millimeters, offered effective protection superior to that of many heavier tanks. Its main weapon, the feared 75mm KWK 42L/70 gun, was deadly accurate and capable of destroying enemy tanks at over 2,000 meters. Unlike the Tiger I, which emphasized raw power, the Panther focused on balance. Its low profile, agility, and excellent gun made it a natural hunter. Under ideal conditions, a well-commanded Panther could engage and defeat any Allied or Soviet opponent. However, its debut was traumatic. At Kursk, dozens of Panthers suffered catastrophic mechanical failures. The rush to introduce it into combat before completing its testing phase took a heavy toll. Of the initial 200 Panthers, almost half were put out of service due to technical problems, but over time, engineers managed to fix the most serious flaws, and the Panther began to show its full potential. On the battlefield, the Panther became a persistent threat. In Normandy, Allied forces soon discovered that conventional Sherman guns ricocheted off its frontal armor like rubber bullets. Only tank destroyers, aerial bombardment, or ambushes could stop it. In the east, the Soviets learned to fear its lethal range, which forced them to undertake risky maneuvers to outflank it. But like any sophisticated design in times of total war, the Panther also had its downsides. Its suspension system was complex and delicate, and its maintenance in open fields required expertise and time, both of which were in short supply in the final stretch of the war. Internal space was limited, and reliability still couldn't match that of the rugged T-34. And while its mobility was excellent on the road, mud, ice, and urban debris reduced its advantage considerably. Still, Panther production was a priority. More than 6,000 units were built between 1943 and 1945, making it one of the most numerous tanks in the German arsenal. It was expensive, yes, but much more viable than the Tiger II. Germany relied on it as the backbone of its panzer divisions until the very last day of the conflict. The Panther wasn't just a formidable tank, it was also a lesson in design. After the war, its characteristics would influence future post-war tanks, such as the American M26 Pershing or the Soviet T-44. Its combination of power, speed, and protection set a precedent in modern military engineering. In combat, the Panther was both respected and feared. Its sleek, angular silhouette was etched in the memories of those who faced it. It was the balance between the roar of the Tiger and the mass production of the Panzer IV. It wasn't invulnerable, but it was lethal. It wasn't infallible, but it was dominant. Today, few operational units survive, but its legacy remains. The Panther was at the heart of German armored warfare in its final stages. A symbol of what could have been a technical revolution had it not come too late for the Reich. Stug III, the immovable armored vehicle that defended the heart of German strategy. Not all the steel giants that changed the course of the war had rotating turrets, nor were all armored vehicles conceived for the offensive. Some were born to resist, to be the shield of the infantry, to defend positions until the last projectile. Among them, one stood out for its versatility, effectiveness, and almost omnipresent presence on all fronts of the conflict. Its formal name was Sturmgeschütz III, but everyone simply called it the Stug III. At first glance, the Stug III did not possess the imposing silhouette of a Tiger tank or the refined balance of a Panther. It lacked a turret, its profile was low, its design almost modest. But beneath that simplicity hid one of the most lethal and effective machines in the German arsenal. In fact, the Stug III was the most produced armored vehicle by the Third Reich throughout the entire war, with more than 10,000 units manufactured. Originally conceived as an assault gun, the Stug III was developed to provide direct support to infantry, destroying enemy fortifications and reinforcing breakthroughs with firepower. It used the chassis of the already veteran Panzer III tank, which allowed for cheaper production and simplified logistics. Instead of a turret, it mounted a fixed gun in an armored casemate, which reduced its height and made it a difficult target to hit. The most successful model, the Stug III Aus FG, was equipped with a 75mm Stug 40L/48 cannon, the same caliber as the Panzer IV and some Panthers. This weapon was effective against both fortifications and enemy tanks. Its low profile made it ideal for ambushes, concealing itself behind ruins, hedges, or hills and hitting the enemy with devastating accuracy. Although it was not originally designed as a tank destroyer, the development of the conflict and the scarcity of resources pushed the Stug III into that role, and it fulfilled it with unexpected effectiveness. On the Eastern Front, the Stug III became the scourge of the T-34s. In Italy and Normandy, it surprised Shermans from static, well-camouflaged positions. Its accuracy and penetration power made it a formidable adversary despite its apparent simplicity. From a technical perspective, the Stug III was a marvel of efficiency. It weighed 23.9 tons, considerably lighter than other German armored vehicles. It reached speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour, 25 miles per hour, and its range was sufficient for extended operations. It was powered by a 296 horsepower Maybach HL120 TRM engine, and its frontal armor reached 80 mm 3.1 inches in the final models. While it lacked the flexibility of a traditional tank, its compact design and low production cost made it a force multiplier. Stug III crews were generally experienced veterans assigned to independent battalions or infantry divisions. They specialized in defensive combat, utilizing camouflage tactics, standoff fire, and tactical withdrawal. The effectiveness of these units was such that many sectors of the front preferred Stugs to conventional tanks. Its greatest advantage, however, was its strategic adaptability. In a Germany beset by logistical collapse and resource shortages, the Stug III offered a practical solution. It could be mass-produced, more easily maintained, and deployed wherever it was most needed. It was the workhorse of the German defense, especially in the final years of the conflict, when heavy tanks were increasingly scarce and difficult to operate. But it wasn't all virtue. Its fixed gun meant the Stug had to rotate its entire chassis to aim laterally, making it vulnerable in mobile combat. Furthermore, without a turret, its visibility was limited and its ability to react to multiple threats was reduced. In urban combat or coordinated enemy attacks, the Stug could be quickly overwhelmed. Still, in the grand scheme of things, its impact was enormous. The Stug III was the backbone of the German resistance on multiple fronts. Its design influenced future self-propelled fighting vehicles, and its effectiveness continues to be studied in military academies as an example of how a seemingly secondary vehicle can decide battles. Today, several Stug III units are preserved in war museums around the world. Its low silhouette and fixed guns still inspire awe. It was the wall of steel that held up the Reich's defenses when everything began to crumble. It didn't roar like a tiger, nor did it hunt like a panther, but the Stug III held, fired, and never retreated. Messerschmitt Me 262, the first jet fighter that caused terror in the skies of Europe. In the skies of Europe, where the roar of propeller engines mingled with the constant echo of war, a new threat emerged like a harbinger of the future. It didn't whistle like the Spitfires or whir like the Mustangs. Its sound was a different howl, deep and sinister, like that of a bird of prey about to pounce on its prey. It was the whir of a turbine, but behind that high-pitched sound came death. The name of this aerial predator was the Messerschmitt Me 262, the first operational jet fighter in history. When the Me 262 first took to the skies in real combat, the war had already tipped the scales in favor of the Allies. But that fleeting and devastating appearance revealed something chilling. Nazi Germany had broken through the technological barriers of the time and was at least a decade ahead in aeronautics. The Me 262 Schwalbe, German for swallow, was an engineering masterpiece. Designed by Willy Messerschmitt and his team in 1938, its development was hampered by technical problems, shortages of strategic materials, sabotage, and fateful political decisions, including Hitler's order to convert it into a bomber, delaying its entry into active service as a pure fighter. Still, when it was finally deployed in 1944, it was a game-changer. Technically, the Me 262 was a gem. Powered by two Junkers Jumo 004B turbojets, it reached speeds of 870 km per hour, 540 miles per hour, allowing it to outrun any Allied fighter that barely touched 700 km per hour, 430 miles per hour. It could climb faster, attack in a dive, and flee without a chance of being hit. It was armed with four 30mm Mk-108 cannons, capable of destroying a heavy bomber with just a couple of hits. Some models even carried R-4M air-to-air missiles, outperforming modern fighters by decades. In combat, the Me-262 was a lethal predator. It swooped down on Allied bomber formations like a steel falcon, opening fire at close range and then disappearing before its escorts could react. Its speed and penetration capability allowed it to break through the densest defensive line and return unscathed to its base. For Allied pilots, the Me-262 was not just an enemy, but a phantom, a terror of the skies, impossible to reach and impossible to escape. But technical genius does not always translate into victory, and the Me-262 arrived too late. Only about 1,400 units were built, and less than 300 participated in active combat. Constant interruptions in its production, lack of fuel, a shortage of trained pilots, and Allied attacks on factories limited its global impact. It was a sword of Damocles hanging over the enemy, but it rarely fell. Furthermore, its turbines, although revolutionary, were fragile. Their lifespan barely exceeded 25 flight hours, and they required precise handling. Any sudden acceleration could cause an explosion. On the ground, the Me-262 was extremely vulnerable. The runway's takeoff were a constant target for bombers, and if it managed to take off, enemy fighters lurked in the surrounding area, waiting for the moment when the plane took off or landed its most vulnerable moment. Hitler, obsessed with the concept of the Blitz bomber, insisted for months on converting the Me-262 into a ground attack bomber. This order considerably delayed its introduction as an interceptor fighter. Only when the Luftwaffe's top brass managed to convince the Führer of the aircraft's potential as a fighter, it was too late. The skies were littered with Allied squadrons, and Germany was in retreat on all fronts. Despite its limitations, Me-262 units, such as the famous Jagdtiger 44 led by the legendary Adolf Galland, achieved impressive results. In an ideal ratio, the Me-262 could shoot down up to 5 enemy fighters for every one of its own destroyed. It was a machine that marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. Today, the Me-262 is considered the father of modern combat aviation. Its design influenced generations of subsequent fighters, both Soviet and American. It was a flash in the pan, a glimmer of the future amid the ruins of the Third Reich. It couldn't change the outcome of the war, but it did leave an indelible mark on the history of aviation. Focke-Wulf Fw-190, the aircraft that defeated the proud British Air Force in aerial warfare, where fractions of a second separate life from death, every advantage counts: speed, maneuverability, acceleration, firepower, and endurance. And among the turbulent skies of Europe, one German aircraft proved to possess it all. It was agile, ferocious, robust, and lethal. Its name became synonymous with tactical superiority and a nightmare for Allied pilots. It was the Focke-Wulf Fw-190, nicknamed by many simply as the Sky Killer. Designed by engineer Kurt Tank, the Fw-190 represented a radical shift in German aeronautical thinking. Unlike the sleek Bf-109, which dominated the skies in the early years of the conflict, the Fw-190 was conceived from its core as a complete combat platform capable of intercepting, escorting, ground attacking, and survivable combat. Its radial engine, reinforced airframe, and exceptional aerodynamics made it a rugged beast, ideally suited for the many scenarios of modern warfare. The initial model, the Focke-Wulf 190A, entered combat in 1941, surprising the Allies on the Western Front. Its 1,700 horsepower, 14-cylinder BMW 801D2 radial engine allowed it to reach speeds of up to 650 km per hour, rivaling even the best British fighters. But what truly distinguished it was its maneuverability at low and medium altitudes, where it outperformed even the legendary Spitfire MQV. Technically, the Fw-190 was a work of mastery. Engineering. Its short, wide wings gave it instant rudder response, while its wider landing gear, unlike the Bf-109, made it much more stable during takeoffs and landings. Its fuselage was tough and its cockpit well protected. It could absorb impacts, withstand extreme conditions, and still return home. But perhaps most feared by enemies was its lethal arsenal. FW-190 variants were armed with a combination of 20mm MG-151 cannons and 30mm Mk-108 cannons capable of tearing apart enemy fighters and heavy bombers with a single burst. It was like having a small anti-aircraft gun flying at lightning speed. On the Eastern Front, the FW-190 became Germany's response to growing Soviet air dominance. In North Africa, it braved harsh desert conditions with superior mechanical reliability. In France and Germany, it defended cities and armored columns from relentless Allied bombing raids. Its fighter bomber version, the FW-190F, could carry bombs, rockets, and external fuel tanks, becoming a devastating ground attack aircraft. The Luftwaffe used it in multiple roles, from interceptor to fighter bomber, reconnaissance aircraft, and even in night combat missions. Its versatility was such that it gradually replaced several older models, establishing itself as the all-in-one fighter in the German air arsenal. Yet, like so many other symbols of Nazi power, the FW-190 was a victim of its time. Although more than 20,000 units were produced, its impact was overshadowed by the growing number of Allied fighters. As American and British squadrons deployed more advanced fighters, such as the P-51 Mustang with greater range and speed at altitude, the FW-190's superiority began to erode. Furthermore, its high-altitude performance was poor in early versions, making it vulnerable during bomber escorts at over 7,000 meters. To address this, variants such as the FW-190D-9, known as the Dora, were developed, equipped with a Junkers Umo 213 inline engine. This version improved its altitude performance, and some consider it the best version of the aircraft. But even by the appearance of the Dora, it was already too late. By then, the Luftwaffe was in retreat, its veteran pilots were becoming scarce, and the skies were saturated with enemy aircraft. Still, FW-190 pilots, such as Walter Nowotny and Josef Priller, wrote their legend in the skies, shooting down dozens, even hundreds of enemy aircraft. In their hands, the FW-190 was a lethal extension of will and steel. Today, the FW-190 is remembered as one of the finest fighters of World War II. It was feared, respected, and admired. Its design influenced future generations of fighter aircraft. Its metallic roar and powerful silhouette still evoke a time when aerial dominance was decided by courage, skill, and the right machine, and few were as perfect for killing as the Focke-Wulf 190. Messerschmitt Bf 109, the legendary German aircraft that gave them the edge during the first half of the war. Before the skies filled with the roar of jets, before the world knew the swift shadow of the Me 262 or the brutality of the FW-190, there existed a fighter, an angular and lethal silhouette that wrote its legend in fire, smoke, and steel. Its name was feared, its lines were unmistakable, and its legacy immortal. It was the Messerschmitt Bf 109, the fighter that defied time. Designed in 1934 by Willy Messerschmitt, the Bf 109 was a revolution in itself. In an era dominated by fabric biplanes and wooden structures, the 109 opted for an all-metal fuselage, enclosed cockpit, and retractable landing gear. It was the future, condensed into an aluminum projectile. This made it extremely fast, easily maneuverable, and above all, terrifyingly deadly. Its name comes from the factory where it was born, Bayerische Flugzeugwerke, hence the prefix Bf. But it soon transcended its industrial origins and became a living symbol of the Luftwaffe. It was Germany's primary fighter from the outbreak of war until its final throes, and not only that, the Bf 109 was the most produced fighter aircraft in history, with more than 33,000 units built. Technically, the Bf 109 evolved into dozens of variants. Its modular design allowed for this. From the E model, for Emil, which dominated the skies during the Blitzkrieg, to the more advanced G and K models, capable of flying at over 680 kilometers per hour, carrying 30mm cannons and challenging the enemy's most modern fighters. Powered by engines such as the Daimler-Benz DB601 and later the DB605, the Bf 109 was capable of rapid acceleration, extreme altitude climbs, and tight maneuvers that few could match. Its cockpit, although cramped and somewhat uncomfortable, offered excellent forward visibility. And its low-wing design with narrow landing gear made it agile in the air, although treacherous on takeoff or landing. During the Battle of Britain, the Bf 109 faced its first major challenge. Against the British Spitfires and Hurricanes, it proved to be a formidable opponent, although its range was limited with only 20 minutes of effective combat time over the English Channel. In expert hands, it was a devastating weapon. Pilots such as Werner Mulders and Adolf Galland wrote their legends there, fighting in duels that defined 20th century air supremacy. On the Eastern Front, the Bf 109 became the standard-bearer of aerial warfare. In those vast expanses of sky, it participated in massed engagements, endless chases, and escort and ground attack missions. It was in those battles that the most feared aces in the history of aviation were born. Erich Hartmann, with 352 confirmed victories, and Gerhard Barkhorn with 301. Both did so aboard a Bf 109. Never again in the history of flight will such figures be repeated. The advantages of the Bf 109 were clear: speed, firepower, ease of production, and adaptability to multiple missions. It could operate as an interceptor, fighter bomber, reconnaissance aircraft, or even a night fighter. Mechanical reliability made it ideal for keeping it in service even under extreme conditions. But not everything was perfect. The narrow landing gear caused numerous accidents on the ground, and rear visibility from the cockpit was poor. Its range remained limited, and toward the end of the war it was beginning to be outperformed by Allied fighters like the P-51 Mustang, which offered comparable performance with twice the range. The Bf 109 was a match for the P-51, but it no longer dominated the air, so the balance began to even out. And yet even in the final days of the Reich, when Berlin lay in ruins and the Luftwaffe was disintegrating, the Bf 109 continued to fight. The last escort flights, the desperate attacks on bomber formations, the final duels in gloomy skies, they all featured the presence of this aircraft that refused to die. After the war, its legacy did not fade. The Bf 109 was used by countries such as Spain, Switzerland, Finland, and Israel. In fact, in the 1948 War of Independence, the first fighters of the nascent state of Israel were versions of the Bf 109 assembled in Czechoslovakia. Its history did not end with the Third Reich, but projected beyond like a winged shadow of turbulent times. To this day, enthusiasts consider the Bf 109 more than an airplane. It is an icon, a symbol of power, tragedy, and evolution. It is the machine that accompanied Germany from the arrogance of the Blitzkrieg to total decline, a winged witness to destruction, glory, and fall. It was the first soldier of the Third Reich in the sky, and one of the last to become extinct. VS-1, the revenge bomb that Hitler used to punish his enemies. In the history of warfare, few weapons have generated as much psychological fear as material destruction. In 1944, the skies above England began to roar with a distinct sound. It wasn't the whir of propellers or the whine of fighter and bomber engines, but a repetitive metallic hum that seemed to herald the arrival of hell. A hum that, when it stopped, meant death and devastation. The V-1 was born, the first flying bomb, the first cruise missile in history, a weapon designed for revenge. Its official name was Phi 103. But Nazi propaganda dubbed it Vergeltungswaffe 1, or Vengeance Weapon 1. It was conceived not as a tool of strategic victory, but as punishment, a brutal reprisal for the constant Allied bombing of German cities. If London was burning, Berlin was bleeding too. And Hitler wanted a response that was as symbolic as it was terrifying. Designed by engineer Robert Lusser, the V-1 was, in essence, an unmanned aircraft, a winged missile launched from ramps in occupied Europe. Its construction was simple, almost industrial. A metal casing, rectangular wings, a gyroscope guidance system, and an Argus 014 pulse jet engine that emitted that chilling hum. It flew at 640 kilometers per hour, at an altitude of between 900 and 1,200 meters, and had a range of up to 250 kilometers. Each V-1 carried an explosive charge of 850 kilograms of amatol, enough to destroy an entire city block. And it did so without warning. The first were launched in June 1944, a few days after the Normandy landings. Immediately, southern England became the target of a new kind of war, a war without a pilot, without morale, and therefore without a soul. London, already battered by the 1940 Blitz, once again became a city of air raid shelters. Sirens wailed day and night, and fear of that unmistakable sound, the mechanical whirring that foreshadowed monstrous explosions, spread throughout the population. more than 9,500 V1s were launched against England. Around 2,400 hit their target, killing more than 6,000 people and injuring tens of thousands. From a technical standpoint, the V1 was an impressive achievement. It was cheap, easy to mass produce, and could be launched from mobile platforms or even aircraft, such as the Heinkel He 111 bombers. Although its accuracy was low, as it had no guidance systems and only flew in a straight line at a constant speed, and with a predictable target using rudimentary arithmetic, its psychological impact was disproportionate. The Nazis didn't care that they all hit their designated targets. They didn't need to be accurate, they just needed to arrive and sow panic. The challenge for the Allies was immediate. How do you stop a bomb that flies alone, at high speed, and appears without warning? The answer was a combination of strategies: anti-aircraft artillery, tethered balloons, interceptor fighters like the Spitfire and Tempest, and even the development of more sophisticated radar systems. Some British pilots risked their lives by approaching the V1s and literally nudging them with their wingtips to knock them off course. It was a deadly dance in the sky. But the history of the V1 doesn't end with its offensive use. It also inspired a technological revolution. It was the direct predecessor of modern cruise missiles, which would be further developed in the fearsome V2 missile, which we'll discuss later. The Allies, having captured some intact units, studied its design and replicated it in their own weapons programs after the war. The Cold War inherited its spirit, and the era of unmanned weapons began with this German missile. However, the V1 also highlighted the limits of the Third Reich's strategy. Although it wreaked havoc and sowed terror, it could not change the course of the war. It was a weapon of desperation, a belated retaliation, an attempt to upset the balance when everything was already shaky. As the Allies advanced and the launch pads were destroyed, its effectiveness declined dramatically. By March 1945, the threat had almost completely vanished. And yet its echo persists. In the collective memory, the V1 represents the birth of automatic warfare. It was a machine without conscience, launched against civilians without distinction or warning. It was an extension of blind hatred, the desire for revenge of a regime that had already lost its compass of reason. For those who lived through those days, the V1 was not just another weapon. It was a mechanical spectre, a faceless threat, and also a dark omen of what was to come as this predecessor of drones changed warfare forever to this day. Hitler's dangerous ballistic missile, the B-2 revenge bomb that could have changed the course of the war. As the V-1 whizzed across the skies of London, announcing its arrival with an unmistakable roar, a new threat was brewing in the depths of the Third Reich. It would make no noise before striking. It would have no wings, no need for human guidance. It would come from on high, from the void, from the future. And after its impact, it would be too late. It was the V-2, history's first ballistic missile, the culmination of Werner von Braun's dream and humanity's nightmare. This long-range bomb was developed by a team of German engineers under the direction of the brilliant, ambitious, and contradictory Werner von Braun. The Vergeltungswaffe II, or Revenge Weapon II, was the Third Reich's most advanced weapons project. Its technical name was Aggregate 4, but no one remembers it by that designation. The V-2 was not just another bomb, it was the first man-made device to leave the Earth's atmosphere and re-enter it to cause mass destruction. It was science fiction technology in the middle of World War II. The missile was 14 meters long, weighed more than 12 tons, and carried a 1,000-kilogram Amatol warhead. Its liquid-fueled engine, based on ethanol and liquid oxygen, propelled it to speeds exceeding 5,700 kilometers per hour, 3,500 miles per hour, reaching altitudes of up to 90 kilometers, 56 miles, before plunging toward its target at supersonic speed. And the most terrifying thing was that it couldn't be stopped. No fighter could reach it. Radars were incapable of detecting it in time. No anti-aircraft battery was effective. When citizens heard the explosion, it was the first and last sign that a V-2 had been launched. There was no warning, only destruction. The first operational launch occurred on September 8, 1944, over London. Within seconds, a crater opened in the ground. Bodies were torn to pieces. Buildings were reduced to ruins. It was just the beginning. Over the next few months, more than 3,000 V-2 missiles were fired, mainly at England, Belgium, and France, causing more than 9,000 civilian deaths. Technically, the V2 was a prodigious feat. It was equipped with an inertial guidance system that adjusted its trajectory using gyroscopes and servo mechanisms. It featured steering control via nozzle fins and movable aerodynamic surfaces. Launching it required complex moving platforms, precise logistics, and a distributed production network. Yet, despite all these difficulties, the V2 worked, and each shot was a testament to the destructive power the Reich was still capable of wielding. But the creation of the V2 has an even darker story: the human cost of its manufacture. Rather than using conventional factories, the Nazis chose to hide its production in underground tunnels to avoid Allied bombing. Thus was born the Mittelwerk, a facility near Nordhausen, operated with slave labor from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp. More than 20,000 prisoners died building the missiles, whether from starvation, disease, exhaustion, or execution. Ironically, more people died making the V2 than died from its combat impact. In strategic terms, the V2 didn't change the course of the war. Its accuracy was limited, as it could deviate several kilometers from the target, and its production cost was astronomical. Each missile represented a massive investment of resources and time, even using slave labor.